In a forgotten corner of the world lies Blackwood Hollow, a town left behind by time, its streets haunted by silence. No one comes here, and no one dares to leave. Ethan Rivers, a writer seeking solitude to finish his book, hoped to find peace in Blackwood Hollow. But what he found was something far more sinister. Ethan, muttering to himself, "I guess this is home for the next few months." He sighs heavily and slams the car door shut. Ethan walks toward his new house, glancing around suspiciously. The eerie stillness around him. Something about the town felt wrong from the moment he arrived, like an invisible hand pressed against his back, warning him to leave. As Ethan opens the front door to his house, a creaky sound echoes, and the empty, dusty interior. He places his bag down on the floor and walks toward the window, peeking outside. Suddenly, he hears a faint voice behind him. Mrs. Calloway, from outside, calling quietly, "Hello there. You must be the new writer." Ethan, as he walks out onto the porch and sees Mrs. Calloway, a frail, elderly woman, standing on the sidewalk. The fog swirls around her. Ethan, polite but cautious. That's right, Ethan Rivers, just moved in. Mrs. Calloway, with a warning in her tone. "This town isn't what it used to be, Mr. Rivers. You do best to keep to yourself, especially after dark." Ethan, frowning slightly. "Is that so? I'm here to work on my book, not much for company anyway." Mrs. Calloway, nodding knowingly. "Good. Stay inside. The fog, it's thick at night. You wouldn't want to be out when it comes in." She starts to shuffle away, disappearing into the mist. Her words clung to the air like the fog itself, a warning Ethan didn't yet understand. Night has fallen. The town is covered in thick fog, obscuring everything beyond a few feet. Ethan sits at his desk, working by candlelight. Suddenly, on the window behind him, where shadowy figures seem to move in the fog. That night, as Ethan worked on his manuscript, the scream shattered the stillness, pulling him from his thoughts. Ethan, startled, whispering to himself, "What the hell was that?" Ethan rushes to the window, peering into the fog, but sees nothing but swirling mist. His hand trembles as he presses it against the cold glass. It came from the house next door, Mrs. Calloway's home. But when Ethan ventured out to investigate, all he found was emptiness. Ethan grabs a flashlight and cautiously steps out into the fog, his hesitant footsteps as he approaches Mrs. Calloway's house. The front door is ajar. Ethan pushes open Mrs. Calloway's door, and the witch slowly reveals the inside of her home. The furniture is overturned, and the room is in disarray. Ethan pans to the wall, where a strange symbol is etched, glowing faintly in the candlelight. Ethan, whispering, "Mrs. Calloway, are you here?" His flashlight flickers, casting eerie shadows across the room. But there was no one, only the silence, and the strange symbol carved into the wall, a message left behind. The symbol, its jagged lines glowing as the fog outside thickens. Ethan's breath quickens as he stares at it in horror. As Ethan exits Mrs. Calloway's house and returns to his own, the fog thickens, and shadowy figures begin to move in the distance. Ethan pauses, peering through the fog, his heart racing. The figures move slowly, deliberately, before vanishing into the mist. The wind picks up, carrying with it soft whispers. The distant sound of footsteps can be heard, but no one is visible. As he stepped back into the cold, something moved in the fog. Shadows, too distant to be real, yet close enough to fill him with dread. Ethan, calling out into the fog, "Who's there?" There's no response, Ethan's face filled with unease. The fog seemed to breathe, alive with secrets. Ethan could feel it watching, waiting. But for what? As Ethan shuts the door behind him, the whispers grow louder, faint but unmistakable. "Ethan, Ethan." His wide-eyed expression as he turns around, searching for the source of the voice. a low, eerie whisper repeating his name, growing louder and more insistent. And then, as the fog closed in around him, it whispered his name,